Welcome to the Story Learning Podcast, regular doses of language learning tips and motivation to help you become fluent in any language. With me, Olly Richards. For language programs, books, free resources, and much more, visit StoryLearning.com.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the I Will Teach You a Language podcast. Hope you're having a wonderful day. If this is your first time here, then welcome. This is the place where we talk all about language learning, how to become a better language learner so you can learn faster, add more languages to your CV if that's what you want to do, or just take a bit more pleasure in the process and in understanding how your own brain works, which is something that I obviously really enjoy. If you are new here, don't forget to subscribe to the show. That means that you will not miss future stuff, and we've got some very exciting stuff coming. Of course, as we always do. I always say that, I know, but actually we genuinely do. 2018 is going to be full of lots of surprises. All right, now today I want to talk about a mental model and a mental attitude for approaching your learning, which I think which I haven't seen spoken about very much in the field of language learning, but is so important as to make everything else irrelevant almost if you don't get it right. Now, this came from a video I was watching the other day on YouTube. There's an interview with a guy called Jim Kwik, which is Kwik. Now, Jim Kwik is a sort of memory, accelerated learning, speed reading expert, a very inspiring guy. And this was an interview with him, and he was asked about motivation and his thoughts on motivation. And his reply was, well, basically it's the key to life because it controls everything else that happens. Now, he gave an example of a student that he once had who read 30 books in 30 days. Now, when most of us hear this kind of a statistic like that, we think, well, that's just impossible. Yeah, what kind of person can read 30 books in 30 days? A book a day for a month. Can you imagine that? Well, it turns out that this girl who read these 30 books in 30 days, her mum was dying of cancer. And so she read a book a day in order to save her mum. Now, I dare say that if any of us had that kind of motivation to figure something out and to learn something, that is an example of what it might look like, right? And if it's something that you want to learn that badly, you will figure out the solution. You will get it done. Other things stop mattering quite so much. Now, hopefully none of us will ever be in the situation where we have to employ such drastic measures. But there is something that we can learn from this, because it's this power of focus and attention that you apply on a daily basis to everything you do. I mean, we're talking about language learning here specifically, but this is a way of thinking and of conditioning your brain to approach a challenge, which as adults, we're often in danger of forgetting how to do because, as I always say, no one is standing over your head with a gun forcing you to learn the language that you're learning. And so without these external constraints and pressures, I think over time, we're in danger of becoming a little bit too chilled out and a little bit too laid back. Because, it's popular to repeat things like, well, language learning should be fun. And yes, of course it should. And it's absolutely imperative that it's fun. But at the same time, if you if you don't hold on to a sense of urgency in your learning itself, then you're missing a trick. So Jim then went on to say, to give an example of people who struggle to remember people's names. And in the world of memory training, learning and memorizing names is a kind of a big deal. It's a big pain point for many people. I'm an example of that. I am terrible at remembering people's names. But the example that Jim Kwik gave was, well, next time you meet someone at a party and you want to remember their name, and there is a box with $100,000 in cash next to that person, which you can keep if you remember their name, then you will remember their name. You will find a way to do it. You will employ all of your powers of concentration and focus and figure out a way to remember that name. And immediately you have become a memory expert. You've memorized this person's name forever for no other reason than there is a lot at stake. There's $100,000 in cash right there for you if you can remember their name. Now, it seems like a trivial example, and yet I don't think you could possibly refute that. We can remember stuff if we want to. It comes down to a question of if we want to. Now, some people are motivated by these positives. You might not be the kind of person who is motivated by $100,000 in cash, so we can flip it on its head and we can use the kind of loss rather than the gain. We can use the loss method. So we can say, right, you meet someone at a party, you need to remember their name, and there's a guy standing with a gun to your head and he'll pull the trigger if you don't remember that person's name in the next 5 minutes when you are asked again. Now, that's a pretty compelling reason to remember that person's name. Your life is on the line. Do you think you will dig deep and find the resources you need inside your brain to remember that person's name? Yes, you will. Now, let's apply this to language learning for a minute. Let's say that in the gun-to-the-head situation, where you have to remember someone's name, your powers of focus are cranked right up and they're at a 10. That's, you cannot work harder if you had to. This is the limit of your mental ability. Now, when you're sitting down to learn languages every day, where are you on the scale of mental energy expenditure in your brain? Are you at that 10? I know I'm certainly not. It's very difficult to maintain that. Are you at a 6 or 7, or are you maybe down at a 3 or 4? Now, I suspect that for many people who have been learning their language for a while and they're not in that kind of like honeymoon period right at the beginning where everything is incredibly fun, I think that most people settle into a bit of a rut, and when they're sitting down to learn languages every day, whatever they're doing, whether they're listening to audio, whether they're trying to learn vocabulary, they're probably operating at about a 3 or a 4 level of focus. Now, there's so much to learn in languages. There's so much vocabulary to learn, so much grammar to understand, and we can't always engineer learning of things. We can't sit down and say, okay, I'm going to understand this grammar point today. Sometimes stuff happens more gradually. We don't always know why certain things happen, and of course, that is fine. However, if we are always operating at this kind of 3 or 4 level of energy, what kind of opportunities are we missing? What things could you bring the power of your brain to bear on? Like Jim Quick said, in that situation where you've got the gun to the head or the $100,000 in cash for you to remember that person's name, you will instantly turn into a memory expert because you will find the resources you need to remember that name. So what happens if you can bring that to language learning? If you can find those resources in your brain and apply that to your language learning, this might be something that you haven't done since your high school exams or whatever, when you really had to remember stuff and a lot was at stake. I really think that as adults, many people are in danger of losing this kind of intensity because most of us are very comfortable, we're quite privileged. No one's forcing us to learn the language. It's supposed to be pleasure. And we often fall back on this idea that learning a language should be for fun, which of course is true. And yet, if we actually want to make progress and achieve things in our languages, we have to learn to use the power of the brain that we have. So my challenge to you here is to think about the gun to the head or the $100,000 in cash and to ask yourself next time you sit down to study, all right, I've got this new word or phrase in front of me and I would really, really like to learn this. I know I would use it every day if I could remember it. Well, put yourself in that situation. Close your eyes and imagine you've got the cash in the bag in front of you. You've got the gun to the back of your head. Imagine that situation. And then memorize that word, memorize that phrase, do what it takes. You will find and draw on powers in your brain that you maybe have forgotten existed. But you need something that pushes you into those corners, those dusty corners of your brain, which are extremely powerful but have been just lying dormant, possibly for years, never needing to be called upon in our comfortable modern lives. Try this as an experiment as soon as the episode finishes here in a minute. Open up your book or your phone, find a word or a phrase, and then just see what happens if you apply yourself to that level. And then once you've done that, ask yourself, okay, well, how can I bring this kind of focus and attention to my language learning on a daily basis? What would it take to get me in the frame of mind? What would it take to remind myself to actually bring 100% of myself to what I'm doing? With this level of energy and motivation, and in many ways, it does come back to motivation. It starts with the motivation, and then from the motivation, you can summon that energy. From that, you can take your learning to a level which you might never get to unless you purposefully do this yourself and push yourself into this realm of learning. All right, so we're going to finish the episode now, and what I want you to do immediately is to select a word or phrase that you want to learn in your target language. Put yourself in either the gun to the head or the cash in the bag. Memorize it as if your life depended on it. Notice what it feels like to be operating at that level of mental ambition. And then ask yourself how your language learning could be different if you brought just a little bit of this focus to your learning every day. If you'd like to leave me any comments or questions, you can do so. The show notes will be at iwillteachyoualanguage.com/episode 254. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. And here at Story Learning, everything that I do is powered by stories, whether that's writing books, teaching lessons, crafting courses. My mission is to help everyone succeed at learning a new language through the power of story. And we now have comprehensive language courses in over 15 languages, from Spanish to French, Korean to Japanese, and across all levels from beginner to mastery. And you can take a 7-day free trial of any of these programs by visiting storylearning.com/courses. I've poured my heart and soul into creating these courses over the last 10 or so years, and we've helped tens of thousands of new students achieve their dreams of learning a new language, all through the power of story. So go ahead and take a free trial. There's no commitment. You can try out our method for free. See if this can also be the breakthrough for you that it's been for so many other people. storylearning.com/courses.